to episode number 26 of the Who Am I podcast with Southside Church of Christ. Here we are considering our identity as Christians and how that affects the way we live in today's world. I am Brian Dill, and here with me, as always, is the extraordinary Jackson Wells. Go!
That was
What in the world?
that was a Chewbacca impersonation.
All right,
That is
that's the closest you can come to a Chewbacca.
closest to I can come to a Chewbacca.
To a Wookiee.
Yeah, a Wookiee. But that was just saying hello.
All right. Well, so since this episode is going to be released on the Monday of Bible Camp, what do you think you're going to be doing when this episode is released?
At 5 a.m. when this episode is released,
Right.
hopefully I will be asleep. If
Really?
I'm awake.
Okay.
If I'm awake at 5 a.m., I'm going to be mad at somebody.
Okay.
But
What time do you usually get up on a typical camp day?
I get up early enough to take a 3-minute shower and get to the staff meeting.
Oh, man.
I,
But what time is the staff meeting?
staff meeting is before the morning Devo, which is at like 7:30 or 8 or something. It tells you how good of a director I am at the time.
That's what I say. What did you say? Aren't you in charge of all this?
The morning time, not a great time.
See, yeah, that's the reason I'm up. I'm usually up at about 6
Yeah.
this morning because campers are up at about 7 or 7:30.
Yeah.
And I want to be as alert as I can be.
It definitely as the week goes on, I get more. The mornings are rougher, but at the beginning of the week, I'll be pretty chipper.
Well, let's go ahead and get this episode started. Okay, as we are looking at this episode, and since we know it's coming out the week of Southside's Bible Camp, I thought it would be a great idea for us to share, let's say, just one of our favorite camp memories.
One, I wrote down 3.
You wrote down 3?
Yeah. I could tell about the time I played soccer with like 6-foot diameter soccer balls. But the one that I want to share with you, that is really probably one of the brightest memories I have, was the year we did the greatest show.
Oh, right.
And you did a theme at your week of camp.
Yes.
Very similar to that. But it was one of my favorite weeks of camp. It was right after the movie had come out, The Greatest Showman. And so the songs were tied into the lessons and everything. Right. Spiritually, it was a great week. I got to work really close with one of my peers, Bryson, and like we got to lead the middle school devos and stuff. It was just so much fun. But the last night, the camp director's oldest daughter, and her name is Skylar, we were doing this obstacle course sort of as a team. Everybody had to hold on to the rope kind of deal and had to work together to accomplish it. And we get to the last one, and people have arrived at the last station at different times, and there's like 8 or 9, 10-ish catapults set up.
Okay.
And when I say catapults, it's a platform piece of plywood with 2 arms sticking up and a rubber band, and you shoot.
Right.
And we were shooting a tennis ball attached to a rope through a clown's mouth.
Oh, man.
And Skylar was the one that made the shot.
Okay.
And it's just funny because it's the camp director's daughter,
Right.
And everybody was like, it was rigged.
Oh, right.
But
yeah.
100% luck. It's just one of those kinds of games. But to see her win, and then the spiritual. It was just a great week,
right?
So
right.
I hold that week in esteem. So, what about you, Brian?
Well, so many years of being involved. I mean, the week that I'm involved with now, I started participating as a staff member in '94.
Wow!
So if I had not missed any years, this would be year 30 of being on staff. I missed a couple of years in college, that sort of thing.
Too cool for school kind of
stuff. It's because I was taking summer classes, that kind of thing, trying to get some gen ed stuff out of the way, things like that. So with the week that I'm involved with, it's younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's no campers that are in high school or anything.
Right.
And so it's all like middle school down to about third grade. And because of that, the nature of the things that we do during the week are very different from a lot of other camps and weeks. And one of the things that we do is something called a staff skit.
Okay.
And the director reads usually some kind of fairy tale story or bedtime story for kids, or whatever. And he casts us in the skit, but we don't know what's coming.
That's awesome.
And he just says, okay, tonight we're reading the story of the Three Little Pigs. And so somebody is going to be, there'll be three people that are the pigs. Somebody's going to be the wolf. Somebody's going to be they're going to put, three or four people to represent each of the houses, to wrap around the pigs or whatever. And so you may be a prop. You may be one of the characters in the story, whatever.
That's great.
And so this was all so new to me. And I started out, I'm 15 years old. I'm just getting my feet wet, still kind of trying to figure out, how does this work and whatever. And they cast me as Hansel in Hansel and Gretel. And I'm like, okay, I've kind of seen how other people do this. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ham it up as big as I can. And it was great because the kids just thought it was the funniest thing in the world. You overreact to everything.
Yeah.
And the kids thought, they loved it. And so that was like, oh man, this is now my favorite part of the week.
Yeah.
Is the years that I get to be in one of the staff skits and get to be like one of the main characters. There was one year I was Rumpelstiltskin. And so I did like the creepiest, weirdest voice I could.
Give us a little bit of it.
Oh no. But I would run, and every time Rumpelstiltskin left the scene, I would, do this little laugh, and I'd jump up, click my heels in the air as I ran off the stage and out of the main building where we were having this. And the director realized that I was doing this every time, and so he started making excuses for me to have to leave the stage. And so I had to keep doing it several times, and the kids just ate it up. And for the next 2 or 3 years, they still called me Rumpelstiltskin.
I love that. I love it when your staff, your adults buy in, and if they're willing to do stuff like that, it makes camp so much better. So if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking about being an adult that's at camp, do exactly that. Last year we had our USO party or talent show, and it was just a bunch of the staff members doing silly stuff, and they knew they were doing silly stuff, and they hammed it up, and the kids lost their minds. Like, I've never been in the lodge and hear the cheers that were that loud. It was an unforgettable experience.
Right. We're going to be talking this week about the question, am I an alien? And the reason we're asking that question is because that is the theme for this week of camp at Big Reedy for Southside. So the concept behind it, I know, is 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 11, which says, "Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh which war against your soul." And the theme is aliens and exiles.
Right.
Now, the New American Standard says aliens and strangers here in this passage instead of sojourners and exiles. So, I mean, depending on which combination of translations you want to use, whatever, aliens and exiles is the focus of this verse. And I wanted to take a second here at the beginning and talk about, like, how did you go about choosing this for your theme for the week of camp? What really drew you to this as an idea for Big Reedy?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, whenever you have a theme that people are passionate about, it makes it a whole lot easier to run with this.
Oh, sure.
Theme. And so space is a theme that, one, I've never fully done before or been
Okay.
part of.
Okay.
But I know that I've got staff members, Roy Staley, who absolutely loves this. And so
Right.
whenever you've got people that are fired up about it, that know a lot about it, it makes it a lot easier to implement. The concept of aliens and exiles and the spiritual application, I think, is great, because more than ever, and it kind of ties into what the whole purpose of our podcast is, more than ever, kids feel like they need to be a part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if they go to church, they've got this battle where the church is encouraging them to not be, and then the world is encouraging them to be a part of the world.
Right.
And so there's this identity crisis where do I belong? And our hope for the week of camp is to help kids figure out that they belong in this brotherhood of aliens and exiles. And it's okay to call yourself that.
That's right.
Because we know that this world isn't going to be where we end up. And
Right.
it
Right.
just makes it a whole lot easier when you know you've got people that are going to go on this journey with you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. And I love that as a theme, as something especially for kids to be reminded of, that you don't have to conform to what the rest of the world is doing.
Right.
You can be different, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that we're just trying to be weird for the sake of being weird.
Right. Right.
But there is clearly a biblical precedent for being different from the world around us.
Absolutely.
And so as we think about this verse as Christians, and when we think about what this verse in 1 Peter says about our identity, I think there are a few things that come to mind for me that I really wanted us to discuss. First of all, just simply, and you mentioned this, the reminder that this world is not our home.
Mm-hmm.
This world is not our final destination. And we sing the song. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through.
Right.
Not exactly the English we use today, but
I guarantee
still,
we'll sing that song at camp. At least
oh,
once.
you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you not? The idea that this is temporary, and Jesus tells his apostles this in John 15 and verse 19. He says, "You are not of this world." And straight up, he just tells them that this world is not really your focus.
Yeah.
And also think of like 2 Corinthians 5, one of my favorite passages to go to when thinking in these terms, because Paul talks about our bodies in terms of being tents. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that you know about a tent, no matter how fancy of a tent it may be, no matter how much money you may have spent on the nicest tent out there, mm-hmm. it's still just a tent.
Yeah.
It's a temporary dwelling place. It is, when you go camping and you go out and you live in a tent, you're usually going to be pretty glad to finally get home.
Yeah.
To get out of sleeping in the woods and sleeping wherever in the tent. You come home and leave the tent life behind, if you want to put it that way. And that's one of the most important things, I think, for us to draw out of this verse.
Absolutely.
This idea.
We definitely have found comfort in the life that we live in, which is fine. But this goes back to, of course, the day that this is being released. You didn't speak yesterday about this, but you were talking about how we think about death. And one of the ways that we think about death is ignoring it. And I'm hoping that I'm not going to scare the kids at camp, making them think about death and stuff. But we want them to know that when life is over, that they have a place in heaven.
That's right.
There are things that they can do to ensure that. And so this world's not my home. Yeah, it's a true statement, and it's something we need to be mindful of.
Right. And I think because this world is not our home, we need to be very careful about what we invest ourselves in.
Oh, yeah.
The things of this world are not to really be the things that we are truly spending our time and our focus and our energy on as a priority.
Right. We had a class recently where we talked about doing pointless tasks, and it was funny because a lot of the things that the kids were coming up with are like, yeah, I love doing those things. I love playing video games. I love solving Rubik's cubes. I love reading books, but like, and it kind of seems harsh, but like, what does that actually accomplish? Am I doing this task for the betterment of God's kingdom, or am I doing this so I feel better about myself, or what? Like, what is the actual reason? And the question that I kind of posed to them was, is what you do going to help God's kingdom? The series is titled Sent Together, and I'm going to talk about it later because it ties into something that you're going to say. But
okay.
we have a responsibility as aliens and exiles to encourage people to come with us. Kind of got a job. It's not a pointless task to go and get people to hop on the alien ship with us when it's time to go. Yes. And whenever we let things of the world distract us, and it just detracts from our mission. Right. And it's just, that's part of being human. That's part of the struggle of this life, is we're going to get distracted. We're going to have to overcome these challenges. And so hopefully at camp, and just at church and in our daily walks in general, we're encouraging not just our kids, but our adults to find ways to combat that.
Right. And I think it's the focus has to be more often on things that are actually of eternal significance.
Right.
We spend so much of our time worrying about and stressing about things that don't actually matter in the biggest picture, in the eternal picture, right? And I think that's a lot of what Scripture is getting at, when it talks about, stop laying up treasures for yourself here on earth, lay up treasures in heaven.
Right.
Don't be conformed to this world, Romans 12, verse 2. Don't love the things of this world, 1 John 2 and 15. There's a lot of passages that we could go to that really speak to the idea of recognizing that this world is not priority one. Mm-hmm. I think when we stop worrying about things that are so temporary, mm-hmm. that are so worldly, and we stop stressing about those things, people are going to look at us kind of funny. Mm-hmm. And our people are going to see that we're kind of weird. Mm-hmm. And that's where this whole idea of being aliens and exiles or strangers or sojourners or whatever words you want to use, where that idea comes in. That's what makes us weird.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
However, one of the things that I think is a challenge for us in this passage is that it sometimes could be tempting to take this maybe to an extreme level.
Yeah.
And we say, well, I'm supposed to be separate from the world, or I'm supposed to be so different from the rest of the world that either we isolate ourselves completely, or we use our differences as a reason for feeling superior to other people about ourselves. Look at how much different I am. Ha ha.
Yeah. and that's it's problematic when definitely when we do that, because then we're not going to be very welcoming to people.
No, not at all.
we want to encourage people to join our purpose. Whenever I think of the term alien, obviously there's the space alien,
right?
But another term that whenever I think of alien, I think of somebody who has moved from their country to another country.
Okay, sure.
And I think about language barriers and how even when there's this struggle, they know that they've moved from an impoverished country to, let's say, America, where they have an opportunity to make a name for themselves.
Sure.
They don't just stop working. One, they work hard and they overcome challenges a lot of times, and you see You see this in maybe somebody's life that you know, where they've come from a different place and then they've worked hard and they've established themselves regardless of the fact that they're not from here. And I think as Christians, we can do that. It becomes so much easier when we do it together. We aren't supposed to be here. Well, we are supposed to be here, but we're not supposed to stay here. And we were trying to get as many people to come along with us. And so when we are on that mission and we're trying to convince people to become Christians, doing that with people, being not in isolation, makes a huge difference. The series that we're in, that I was talking about, is called Sent Together. And the mission doesn't happen in isolation.
Right.
And that's something we've talked about before in our Burden Bearers episode, which might be my favorite episode. But the idea that it's not my job to get as many Christians to heaven. It's our job.
Okay. Yeah.
And
yeah.
we cannot do it in isolation. One of the reasons I love camp is because kids get to go there and do Jesus stuff without judgment. And they're doing it with other kids.
Exactly.
And so when they come home, they're like, okay, we can do this. It is a huge week of encouragement.
Right.
And that is, if there's one thing that I could encourage people to realize about camp, is that when you come back, there's this sense that you can accomplish a lot of things.
Sure.
It's great to ride that.
And I think that what you're trying to accomplish is you're trying to help everyone, kids and adults, also realize that it is possible to be different, to be a stranger, to be an exile, to be an alien, to be different, to be, you may be considered a little weird.
Yeah.
But also still engaging with the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're not removing ourselves from the world. You know, Jesus in John 17, praying for his apostles, says, you know, I'm not asking you, Lord, to take them out of this world. That's not what they need, because they have a job to do still in this world. They have a responsibility, and we do too. And so the challenge then for us is to figure out, how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we go about being different and still engaged with the world?
Yeah.
It's that in the world but not of the world is the phrase that you often hear used.
Absolutely.
How do we do that? What can make us different but not so weird that we're isolated from the rest of the world?
I think Jesus was he was the best at it. Like,
oh, sure.
And I think his model works well. We say he ate with sinners, you know?
Okay.
He didn't stay there. He went home with people who were like him, and he received encouragement. He gave encouragement, but he still went out and told people about who he was.
Right. So one of the things that made Jesus different from others around him was that his level of compassion and his patience with other people, his forgiveness of other people was unique.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be, well, it needs to be true of us, whether it is or not all the time. That's something that needs to be true of us. You know, we need to be different in that we are more patient and we are more willing to forgive and we are more compassionate toward others in our relationships in this world. And that's something that should make us very different from the world.
Absolutely.
But keeps us engaged with the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the kinds of things that were going through my mind is, you know, our generosity. You know, we should be some of the most generous people in the world as Christians. Our priorities should be very different from the rest of the world. You know, we prioritize our relationship with God. We prioritize our relationship with fellow Christians. You know, like you're saying, that has to be something that we take advantage of and use as a way to continue to keep us strong in our faith. And that's different, but it doesn't isolate us from the rest of the world.
Right. It's when you start to get into the nitty gritty of it, it can become confusing.
Right.
But when we are still engaged, man, and we're on fire, this is what I forgot what I was going to say earlier, but I remembered. When we are filled to the brim with God, it doesn't, other stuff just doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
Stuff that doesn't have any eternal significance stops mattering.
Right.
And when we are filled with God, one, all we want to do is tell others about him, and it becomes a lot more difficult to be swayed by the world.
That's right.
And so you're able to engage with it effectively and not be pulled back in.
Right. So the question, am I an alien? I think in a lot of ways we need to be ready to say, yeah, absolutely. That's supposed to be a part of what defines my role or identity as a Christian.
Absolutely.
But not to the degree that I am isolating myself from the rest of the world, or I'm feeling superior over everybody else around me because I'm so much better, quote unquote, than everybody else.
Yeah.
We are different from the rest of the world and should look different.
Yeah. If you're listening to this and it is the week of camp, I just ask that you pray for us. You were talking about being compassionate and patient and generous. By Thursday, it will be worn thin.
Yes, right.
Just ask that you continue to pray for us, and hopefully that it'll be a great week. I know.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. It's a great theme. It's a great reminder for all of us. And so we want to thank all of you who are listening for listening to this week's episode. We hope that it has been one that is going to help you grow in your faith, and especially will be a blessing to you as you grow in your identity as a follower of Jesus. Have a blessed day.